Before we begin, let's walk through our webinar platform together. Each of the buttons at the bottom of your screen relate to sections in the ON24 console. The speaker view is where you will see our presenters throughout the webinar. The slide view is where you'll see the accompanying slides. Our poll questions will appear in the slide area. Be sure to click directly on the slide to answer poll questions throughout the webinar. You can resize these widgets for a larger or smaller view. You may also follow along with a PDF version of the slides that can be found in the Related Content widget. In the Related Content section, you can access any accompanying materials for this webinar. This includes a PDF copy of the slides and many times will often include related resources. Using the Reaction button, you can react to content throughout the webinar. Reactions from our audience throughout the webinar will float along the console screen. Use the Q&A section to ask questions directly to our speakers throughout the presentation. In the Speaker Bio section, you can find out more about our presenters, including their contact information. If you need technical assistance, please use the Help button below. Many times, technical issues can be resolved by opening the webinar in Google Chrome or refreshing your browser. Finally, the Evaluation button contains our post-webinar evaluation survey. Here is where you can share your commentary and feedback on the presentation. We hope you enjoy our free webinar. Now, let's get into today's topic.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to How AI is Changing Automation. Thank you very much for joining us today as we're going to share some of what we've been learning about this fascinating and rapidly evolving topic in the hope that it can help you and your organizations to embrace AI confidently and responsibly. My name is Edwin Harvey, and I'll be your host and moderator for today. I am a director of AI solutions and training at YPTC. YPTC, or your part-time controller, is a professional services firm that has specialized in nonprofit financial management for over 30 years. The biggest goal of our work is to give our nonprofit clients clear and quality information so that they can make informed business decisions. Our services include CFO-level leadership and strategy support, controllership services, transactional accounting work, and financial reporting and data visualization, among others. We have offices all around the country, now including Chicago and the Pacific Northwest, and we also serve clients all over the US remotely through our remote services team. Speaking of all over the US, I'm joined today by co-presenters Patricia Bueso and Christine Chaco. Christine, I think you're connecting from Philadelphia. Patty, if I'm right, you're connecting today from Houston, and I'm connecting today from Los Angeles. So we really are sort of spread out all over the U.S. today, which is a lot of fun. So for those of you who are joining early in the morning, I feel you. For those of you who are getting toward lunch and getting hungry, we feel you too. So whatever you need to do to sort of settle in and be comfortable today. Patty is a manager in our Texas team, and Christine is a technology associate in our client technology solutions group. So we'll be hearing a lot more from each of them in just a moment. A couple of housekeeping items to address before we really dive into the content. Our marketing and training support team members are available in the background today to respond to troubleshooting and CPE questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to any other questions you may have, time permitting. So please do use the Q&A feature here in the ON24 platform. If you are a repeat attendee of our webinars, first, thank you. We're really glad to hear that they're helpful and you're coming back. We love to share our knowledge. You may be expecting, though, poll questions that serve as attendance checks for CPE. We're trying something new today, this time. So instead of poll questions, you'll see that in this, instead of poll questions in the slides, look out for attendance checks that are going to pop up automatically within the On24 webinar platform here. They'll be about every 13 minutes or so. You'll hear a ding each time one comes up, and you'll need to respond to 3 out of the 4 of those to receive CPE credit. You can track your progress in the Earn CPE widget here in the platform. And note that by the end, if you've already responded to the first 3, you will not see the 4th one. So you only need to respond to 3 out of 4. Also, while talking about the platform, the slides for today's session are available for download in the related content widget here in the webinar platform. And also in there is our one-page checklist for mindful prompting. If you haven't seen that before, that's a really great resource to take a look at there as well. Okay, so let's talk about let's really get into our topic for today. AI and automation, and specifically how AI is changing automation. We're going to talk about, in order to sort of understand that, we're going to need to talk about AI versus automation, compare the two, and wrestle a little bit with the idea that AI is a form of automation, but that it's a very special case of automation. As I think Christine's going to talk about in a little bit, it's the special case or the subset that is now accounting for 99% of what automation can theoretically do. There's a lot of sort of hype and excitement in there, but ultimately we want to build your confidence in being able to assess the value of AI for any given use case that you're considering. And to understand that traditional automation continues to have an important role to play alongside AI. So we're also going to talk about, as a part of that, the evolution of generative AI from basic chat with a large language model to what are now called reasoning models, and ultimately to the buzzword of 2025, which is agentic AI. And we'll think about how those expand the horizons of what AI and automation can do. And then we also need to get into a bit of data privacy and compliance to talk about risk, ethics, and guidelines and policies. Because using these tools effectively and responsibly are really one and the same. And there's some novelty and some sort of strangeness to AI as compared to other forms of automation. And we want you to feel confident in that as well, and understand why and when you may need policies or guidelines or ethical considerations beyond what you had done with technology before. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to kick things off here with this idea of AI being a form of automation, but a very special kind of automation. So I've got a slide up here that is full of terms and text. It's very dense. It's going to be helpful after the webinar when you come back and look at it. But really, what I want you to do for the moment, if you would, is to focus on a scenario. And we're going to walk through a scenario where we think about 3 different kinds of automation and sort of go up the chain toward from basic robotic process automation to generative AI. So let's start with a scenario, and it's represented here in italics. So let's imagine we have an organization that is driven largely by volunteers. And we want to hear from our volunteers to know how they're feeling about the work that they're doing, get any suggestions that they may have for how to improve our organization and our programs, and we want to do that frequently. So one way that we could do that is to make a form available, a digital form, where our volunteers can go anytime and submit a response and tell us sort of way to check in, a kind of a suggestion box, an opportunity to raise concerns or trumpet successes. And so they can just go on there and type in whatever they want to type. Okay, so how do we then use that information and process that information? We may be getting thousands of responses each month, maybe even each week. So with robotic process automation, we can do things, so without AI, so to speak, right? We can do things like showing the average number of total volunteer responses and then compare those to traditional levels or historical levels. how many responses are being submitted each month, and is that more or less than the most recent months? And we can sort of look at the trends. There's no AI involved there. It's sort of simple pivoting and filtering and sorting and counting that's happening. So we can write rules that a computer can follow to do all that analysis for us routinely and repeatedly, say on a weekly or a monthly basis. But what if we want to go on and say, classify the sentiment of each survey response as either positive or negative? Suddenly we're going to find that the number of rules that we would need to write for a traditional automation tool to do that classification are going to be simply too long, right? It's going to take us so long to write the rules because we're going to need to look at each open form text response from our volunteers and say, what makes this right? What makes this positive or what makes this negative? That's the kind of work that a human could do very quickly, right? And so maybe in the past we've had humans going through and reviewing each response and labeling it as either a positive response or a negative response. And then we can use traditional automation to sort of compare positive versus negative over time once we have that data. But once we have a lot of that data already in place, we've got rows and rows and rows of survey responses, each of which has been labeled positive or negative. Now we can use machine learning to look for patterns in that data. And then using those patterns, it can classify new feedback going forward, right? And so what the machine learning process does, and this is the big leap away from robotic process automation, what the machine learning process does is create its own rules. And it can create enormously complex rules, many thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of rules by which to judge any particular survey response and label it either positive or negative, right? Handling things like terms in context, right? The terms love or hate or excited or satisfying or happy, sad, whatever they may be, being able to put those in complex context and decide whether that response is actually positive or negative based on the data that we already have, all of our pre-labeled data that we've been going through for years to categorize. So that's what machine learning does. It builds algorithms that run on probabilities. Is this more likely to be positive or negative? Is a person more likely to find this positive or negative? Because it has a bunch of data on what people have labeled before. That's a really big leap because we're no longer saying absolutely yes or no, this is positive or negative. It's not 100% assuredly right or wrong in its calculations the way robotic process automation is when doing the counts of survey responses and doing filtering and sorting. Rather, it's a machine making its best guess based on patterns it's identified from data that we've given it that's been labeled previously. Okay, so in some sense, a smaller leap, but also a very big leap from machine learning to generative AI is what allows us to do something like analyze all volunteer feedback from the last 12 months and make recommendations considering our mission, strategic plan, and our board-approved budget, right? This would be a natural language question that we can ask, and an AI tool, a generative AI tool, can actually answer that question for us. It's still machine learning. It's still doing that based on a data set and a group of probabilities that created in the machine learning process. But it's now a process that happened at a massive scale. So we're no longer talking about giving the machine learning 10,000 or 100,000 rows of pre-labeled positive or negative data. We're simply giving it everything that's ever been written or recorded available online on the internet. And we're having 100,000 computers work in unison for months to build an algorithm that can now understand our natural language questions and respond to us. So in a sense, there's a bigger leap from robotic process automation to machine learning because we're going from what we might call deterministic programming, if, then, yes or no, 1 or 0, to a probability-based tool that comes out of the machine learning process. With generative AI, we're then scaling up that machine learning process so that its set of data that it's training on and its ability to respond has a scope that is ideally is getting close to the scope of judgment that a human has themselves. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Christine, because I know that we've got, Christine, a case study here of where we have used this generative AI tool together with robotic process automation to sort of come up with a grander solution that makes the best of each of these two tools.
Yes, exactly. So YPTC has built a generative AI tool to help our consultants better serve our clients, providing an assist and a fresh perspective to the written analysis and recommendations that accompany the regular financial statements we provide. First, we use a robotic process automation tool to transform data from our clients' accounting systems into custom tailored financial statements like P&Ls, income statements, and forecasts. This saves our staff a lot of time compared to building spreadsheet-based reports, and we include data validation checks along the way, so the reports are not only quick, but also accurate. This part of the product uses traditional deterministic automation. There is no need for generative AI here, and in fact, generative AI would be risky here because we need these reports to tick and tie and be absolutely accurate. So then we use a generative AI tool to enhance the written portion of our reports. Here, the consultant chooses the financial reports they want to send to the large language model, along with a clear, well-formatted prompt to inform the AI's response. The AI processes this and generates a response, after which our staff can ask follow-up questions, tailoring their analysis even more. Our consultants use the responses as food for thought in creating the analysis and recommendations for the financial package, and they combine the results from the AI tool with their own thoughts and observations to create a well-informed, thoughtful analysis that the client can then use to make decisions about their organization. This really is a collaboration that's led by our human consultants and supplemented by AI, and it all happens in a private system that keeps the client's data safe and secure. Okay, so let's talk about why AI is such a big deal these days. And it's because of what it can do and how it's changing what we can do. Before generative AI, all we had was automation. And then within it, we had machine learning. Computers writing their own rules, but in limited and specific ways that made machine learning really just a form of automation. At this point, machine learning didn't really change what automation could do for us all that much. Generative AI is a subset of machine learning, but it lets you do so much more that it's pushing the boundaries of what can be automated. Now, we can't talk about automation without talking about AI. Generative AI has so massively expanded what we can automate, it's basically taken over it. As Edwin mentioned earlier, it's a subset of automation that is about 99% of it and still growing, and we can use it to do so much. This is where all the hype comes from. This is why every article you see now is about AI. Generative AI can now write and build the automation around it, kind of like a kid designing its own parents. I'll note that those of us who are accountants are doing things ourselves that AI can't do, providing vital services to our organizations and clients, but we also do have opportunities to use AI to make our work more informed, more efficient, and easier. It can help with all sorts of tasks that take us a lot of time and effort, like the ones you see here on the slide. And we already see a lot of nonprofits doing this, but the scale and degree is really ramping up, and there's a whole lot of other use cases.
Yeah, that's great, Christine. It's a good reminder of a theme throughout. We're talking about automation and AI, but there's also the human side of all the work we do as well, which is the sort of elephant in the room of this discussion, if you will, right? And accounting is a great case right now where AI is still a lot of promise and less delivery, especially in terms of transactional accounting, because it's a probability-based tool, right? That is not designed to do one or zero, right or wrong, absolute yes or no, and that's a lot of what we count on and rely on in the high stakes of financial management and sort of accounting guidance and all that important work. So humans continue and will continue to have a very important role to play here. So let's go on then and think about the evolution of generative AI in terms of how we use it and how those core models that result from these massively scaled up machine learning processes that result in generative AI, how we've been using them since 2022 and on into today with some of these new buzzwords, reasoning and agentic.
Yeah, so we have given you a lot of technical terms already, but there are two more that Edwin just mentioned that we really need to put on the table in order to discuss how to use generative AI to help with automation, because they're becoming more and more mainstream. Reasoning models and agentic AI. So these build on top of the generative AI technology that we've been explaining so far. Once you understand generative AI, you can understand reasoning and agentic AI. So let's go through them one at a time. And we'll start with the basic idea of chatting with a generative AI model. What do generative AI tools do? They take your input or prompt and then run that information through their vast knowledge bases or large language models, and they finally generate a response for you. So we prompt the AI, then based on the prompt, AI has no choice but to generate a response. Input, then output. So the questions here, generative AI can answer all of these kinds of questions because this information exists in their core knowledge. It's part of what the AI learned during its initial training or machine learning process, which happened over a period of time and then it stopped learning. So it could search its core knowledge for what others have documented, and it could teach you how to do math, but what it can't do is perform a mathematical calculation itself. So this really shows how it works. AI can't actually do math itself or respond about yesterday's weather because it can't look these things up in its core knowledge. It's merely getting input, doing a lookup of everything it knows, which cut off at a certain point in time, and then it's giving you the best output that it can. This generative AI chat model is still what underlies everything that we're doing now. Edwin, you want to jump in?
It's great. I'm just thinking about that 2 plus 3. And one of the ways that the sort of moment of realization for me was when I thought about how doing simple arithmetic is learning in real time, right? It's you start with 2 and you add 3 more, and then you count up the whole and discover that you have 5. Like in that instant, you're learning. And that's part of what generative AI in this basic form doesn't do. It goes through a machine learning process where it gains all of the knowledge and all of the understanding that it will ever have. And then that ends. And there is no more continuous learning. From that moment on, it's using all of its judgment based on what it learned in that particular moment. So that's part of why it's not capable of doing arithmetic. So we'll talk in a moment. You'll come back to ways that it can actually do some of that. But first, let's look at another case study for a case where we've used this still very powerful basic form of engagement with generative AI as a way to augment another more traditional automation process.
Yeah, so this is a case study about how we recently used AI internally at YPTC in conjunction with more traditional kinds of automation. In this case, we created a process using AI together with 2 Microsoft tools, Excel and Power Automate, to simplify reviewing a large amount of data. At YPTC, we do an annual award celebration where employees can nominate each other through a form, and then we host a big, fun, company-wide virtual award show. But there's a lot of work involved. We have over 800 staff and easily have over 1,000 nominations. Each one needs to be reviewed and potentially made ready for a presenter to share live. So we need to tidy up the nominations and then review them for things like unintentionally negative sentiment, good-hearted but professionally inappropriate language, and confidential information. When someone uses the form, their nomination gets added as a new row in an Excel file. As you can see in these sample nominations, that's here in the blue columns. In this example, I nominated Patty for an award, that's the first row, and she nominated me for one too, that's the second row. The orange columns show the results of the various checks and edits done for each nomination after submission. You can see there's a culture warning on the first row. We take work-life balance very seriously at YPTC, so working on the weekend is just a topic we need to be careful about. On the second row, a specific nonprofit is named, and that just needs to be flagged in case it's confidential. So for each of 1,000 nominations, we need to do all of these checks, as well as tidy up the grammar and spelling and punctuation, and this would all be days of work for human reviewers. So instead, we used Power Automate together with GPT-4o, an AI tool, to help with this. Power Automate grabs the text of each nomination and it plugs it into a pre-written prompt, which it then sends to the AI. The AI then sends back a response, which Power Automate pastes back into the original Excel sheet. How do we make this work? We wrote custom prompts for each of the tasks that the AI needed to perform, like the one on the slide right here, looking for any organizations that we might need to keep confidential. And Power Automate takes this pre-written prompt, adds the text of each nomination, and then sends those together as one completed prompt to an AI tool, which responds with whatever it finds. So for each column that needs to be populated, there is a unique prompt, but the overall process is still the same. This is really an enormous time saver, and it's the kind of task that only a generative AI model can do. No traditional automation tool could handle the nuance required to review things like sentiment, phrasing, or culture concerns. So as you can see, using this example, there's a lot that you can do with generative AI, especially when you combine it with automation. You can apply this to your own data in different ways, perhaps helping you to sort through your donor database, your program data, or maybe survey responses, as Edwin talked about earlier. Maybe there's some information that you keep in notes fields in your donor database, like this donor is related to a certain board member. You might normally have to scan through all of those notes fields manually to find all that information, to find everyone related to your board members, for instance. But using a process like this, AI can do that for you, and it can do it much quicker. Take a look at your current processes, both manual and automated. If part of the process introduces ambiguity or maybe requires some degree of judgment, you may be able to make those processes less manual, more automated, more efficient through the use of generative AI.
Great. Yeah, thank you. This is a really cool case study and totally applicable to other contexts, right? The idea that you've just, imagine in our survey response, volunteer survey response from the beginning, that very first slide, where we've just got each row of data is a different survey response, and we want AI to do something that otherwise a human would have to do for each row in that data. From there on, it's about, if you can explain clearly and logically what it is that the person has been doing, there's a good chance that AI can now be plugged in to do that work, potentially saving minutes, hours, days, weeks, months of work going forward. It's really exciting stuff. So why do we need reasoning models and agentic AI, right? What's the why was all that continuing research required if this basic form of chat with generative AI is such a powerful tool?
Right, that's a great question, Edwin. So really, for all that is great about generative AI, it does have a major drawback, and that is hallucination, which some of you may have heard of before. And the main reason that generative AI tools hallucinate is that when you give them a prompt, they have no choice but to respond, but they are limited by what they've learned, what's in their core knowledge. This means that sometimes they don't have a reasonable response and will basically give you their best guess. That's what hallucination is. So just be aware and be cautious about this. That's the whole point of reasoning AI. This form of AI is really a response to hallucination. It's intended to make AI's responses better. It can reliably handle requests that are more complicated, as it does not just rely on one check of its knowledge base like generative AI. With reasoning AI, when we prompt the large language model, it doesn't just trigger one response that it spits out to us like generative AI does. Instead, it cycles within the large language model, prompting and reprompting itself, seeing its own responses and considering new contexts. Instead of doing one search, figuring out that it doesn't really know the answer, and then just giving you whatever it's got, it will determine that it doesn't know enough, so it should keep searching its knowledge base, its core knowledge, for more information, allowing the AI to ultimately give you a more informed response with much less chance of hallucination. This is similar to how we used to handle hallucination with generative AI. We would prompt it, it might come back with an unsatisfactory answer, and then we would do all the follow-up prompts ourselves to add rationale and more context, forcing the AI to take additional steps that would check its reasoning and prevent hallucination. For instance, if I asked AI, which washing machine should I buy? And that's all I say, it might make something up. But instead, if I ask, give me the top 10 washing machines based on these specific criteria, then pick the top 3 out of those with a priority of these criteria, then give me your top recommendation based on this price point, these specific criteria additionally, then it's much more likely to give me an accurate response because I'm forcing the AI to check itself in specific ways. So that whole process, that's now built into the reasoning AI itself. It doesn't have a bigger or better core knowledge. It's just going through the prompting process multiple times. All right, so then we get to agentic AI. Oh, Edwin, do you want to jump in?
Just to say that this phrase "core knowledge" that you're using is such an important one for understanding. I'm just responding to a question in here in the Q&A, which I'll put up momentarily. But that idea that the core knowledge is a one-time product. It can be updated or changed over time. You can iteratively go back and sort of restart the machine learning process to update a model. And that will ultimately update the core knowledge. But that core knowledge does not, once that process is complete or subsequently completed again or updated, it then sort of closes off and remains closed. And so that reasoning is about circulating through more thoroughly that core knowledge, which is different than saying what I think we're now going to go on and talk about, right? Which is agentic AI having access to knowledge beyond its core knowledge and what it learned in the machine learning process.
Exactly. So with agentic AI, we're giving agency to the large language model itself. Instead of generating that content from its core knowledge and then responding to you, its content is a message or trigger to something else without your even being involved. When we prompt it, the AI is then engaging directly with another program, for instance, connecting to your email account to write or maybe send emails on your behalf, or it could search the web to get you up-to-date information. Chat with generative AI or reasoning AI can't tell you what the weather was yesterday, since that just happened, and their learning process has stopped prior to yesterday, but agentic AI can. It can decide on its own to search the web, and it can then give you a response based on what it finds. It won't necessarily tell you that it did that, but that's how it can give you the answer that no amount of reasoning could do. agentic AI decides on its own what's the best way to get you the best answers. So with generative AI and reasoning AI, they were only ever sending information to you. But now with agentic AI, it's sending these requests out to other tools first. Based on what you are asking it to do, it might be generating a whole bunch of responses that it then sends out to other tools that then feed more prompts into the AI. And then at the end, it'll finally reply to you with, okay, everything's done. I just bought you a house. Okay, it might not be quite there yet, but while this is coming online slowly with bigger stuff, it is already there with smaller needs, like helping us to do searches and automate everyday tasks.
Yeah, we are definitely not recommending that anyone go out and use Gen AI to make capital expenditures. Far from it. But theoretically, and it's part of where the hype comes from, is that AI models could be given the degree of agency necessary to do things like that far exceed and extend beyond their core knowledge and their understanding. Folks, you may have heard a lot recently in the news about GPT-5, and that's a great sort of new evolution that's almost kind of pushing this slide to, is going to need some revision, because we're saying, is that traditional chat with a generative AI model? Is it a reasoning model, GPT-5, or is it an agentic model, or is it an agentic workflow built around an AI model? It's all the above. And part of what's really neat about GPT-5 is that it is fundamentally agentic in the sense that it has the ability to decide on the fly, should it use reasoning? Should it look for sources beyond its core knowledge? Should it take the time and the extra energy to do that? Or is its core knowledge sufficient to answer a question? One of the fascinating things about reasoning models is that they are compelled to reason even when it's not necessary. So they're actually a little bit worse at answering questions quickly that their core knowledge would otherwise allow them to answer, because they're forced to second guess themselves. And so that's one of the neat things about ChatGPT's GPT-5 model, is that it's able to make that judgment and say, oh no, I can answer this question really quickly from my core knowledge, or no, someone's asking about the weather yesterday. I don't have that in my core knowledge. I better go do a web search. Or this is a really rigorous research question. I better take 10 minutes and churn through it. So it's all of these are starting to be combined very efficiently into single models going forward. So Patty, I know we've had you sitting quietly on the sidelines, so thank you. But I'm really excited to ask you here to sort of jump in and tell us about an example of what agentic AI looks like for something more practical than actually having it buy a house for us.
Yes, of course. Thanks, Edwin. All right, so let's take a look at our final case study of the day. As Edwin mentioned, here's an example where agentic AI analyzes quantitative data to tell us who our biggest funder is. In this case, the AI has access to the general ledger from our accounting system, our donor database, and it also has the ability to write and execute code in the Python programming language. So we prompt the AI by asking, who's our biggest funder this year? In a matter of seconds, it interprets the meaning of our question, writes a custom Python program to calculate the metric, runs that program, and then receives the results back and formulates a natural conversational response to our prompt. So it's now becoming increasingly common for AI tools to give us responses by accessing other tools, like Edwin just talked about, right? Designed for things like data transformation, web searching, querying public or private knowledge bases, or even interacting with other tools on your behalf, like your accounting system or your CRM. So this is why you hear people say that AI isn't just a new tool, but rather it's a new way of using tools. The old way was to figure out what you wanted to do and then click and drag and type your way through a traditional app or through multiple apps. Well, the new way is to collaborate with AI to brainstorm what you want to do, and then have the AI tool reach out to and orchestrate whatever other tools are needed to get it done, right? So it's starting to save us a lot of time and make our everyday tasks easier. Now, odds are, if you haven't already used an AI-powered tool, you soon will.
Yeah, that's great, Patty. And absolutely, this is coming, and it's a mindset change. We have a sort of takeaway slide here. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but hopefully this will be helpful in hindsight if you download the slide deck here and want to sort of remind yourselves about what reasoning and agentic models are and what their purpose is. But for the sake of time, let's go ahead and keep moving and dive into the topic of data privacy and compliance, because as we understand how to now sort of understand some of the core concepts in play here, where automation continues to be useful, how it can be augmented by AI, and recognizing when there's a human judgment step involved in an automation that, hey, maybe AI can help with that. It also introduces a whole handful of privacy and security and ethics questions, and I can see some of those coming in across the Q&A. So let's go ahead and dive in. Patty, if you would, sort of start taking us through some of these questions and concerns that I know a lot of folks have about embracing AI.
Yes, sure. Again, so we've talked a lot about using AI more and more for automating processes. However, some of you may still be wondering and are wondering, we can see it through the Q&A, whether it's safe to be using confidential information with AI tools, right? We all went through whiplash in late 2022 and early 2023 when ChatGPT first came out. Everyone got excited about it, but then we all got told to stop using it because of data privacy concerns. So why is using confidential information with these tools now considered acceptable? Well, nowadays, companies hosting major AI models have robust data privacy protections in place to enable enterprise-level use. Now, there's a financial cost to these protections, and the free versions of these tools are still very risky. But if configured correctly, these AI models can now be fully secure and in compliance with standards like SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR. Now, in terms of data and cyber policies, some organizations may already have these policies in place. So it may be useful to review and consider the policies that may already exist in your organization, since much of what is covered in these policies should apply to AI use. Now, this is especially true if you use the included or built-in tools within your productivity suite, such as those offered by Microsoft 365 or Google Suite, which are much safer and less expensive options if you already use these larger suites of tools, right? These are much safer options because the AI tools are operating within the same secured environments as the rest of your data and productivity tools. So here on the slide, you can see a snip of ChatGPT's pricing page. Even the individual pro version, which costs $200 per person per month, does not offer SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR compliance. And for the pro version, you need to review the settings and actively opt out of sharing your data. So as evidenced by this, some AI tools still make it very easy to opt in to things like sharing your data with third parties or allowing your data and prompts to be added into the AI's memory or otherwise used for training. So do take the time to look through the options in your AI tool settings and read the fine print. Also, when we talk about using AI agents, keep in mind that these AI tools, may have the ability to open other add-on tools or software that come with their own sets of risks. So it's important to consider each of those as well. So let's move on now to business risk. Unfortunately, we cannot dig into every detail associated with business risk today, but we want to share some guidance to help mitigate risks. While we are not lawyers and cannot provide you with legal counsel, we did want to note that there are legal situations and legal issues such as copyright and intellectual property with respect to AI tools. And many of these have yet to be settled by courts or legislation. Currently, it is up to individual courts to decide on a case-by-case basis, and there is no legal precedent. So be very careful about content you create with the help of AI, as it may not be yours solely to use, or you may not have the ability to copyright that content. So as an example, in March, the DC Circuit Court of Appeals denied the right to copyright an image that was generated by verbally prompting an AI tool, even though the prompt was elaborate. In this case, and many others, the courts seem to be following the guidelines of the US Copyright Office, which boils down to human authorship as essential for copyright protection. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that when we use generative AI to create content, if we want to defend against others copying or using that content without our permission, then we need a significant trail of human agency behind it, or a tangible index of human agency within it, which must be more than a verbal prompt. In other words, don't assume rights over anything generated purely by prompting, no matter how exacting the prompt may be. And again, recognize that you may need to consult a lawyer, especially as this is changing every day. And you may also need to review contracts around work you're doing or for work that's being done for you, insofar as the language describing who does what or what role technology plays in doing that work may have been written before the emergence of generative AI. And so it could limit what you or your contractors are allowed to do with AI tools, even if they're doing it responsibly and effectively. So again, read the fine print, and if needed, engage a lawyer to help you interpret it.
This is such a fascinating topic, Patty, and I'm glad for the moment that we're not lawyers and we're not giving legal advice, because it allows us to sort of just marvel at the complexity and sort of note the kinds of questions that we hear folks asking. But there's a tool being built to mimic human thought and to do the kinds of things and use the judgment that humans do, and that's raising fascinating questions around how to handle it, and what are the rights of the people that use, simulated humans to help them do things. We're not at that point. I don't actually feel like they are simulated humans. They're really still just probability-based machines running automations. But the questions are growing in complexity every day, and absolutely, reach out to a lawyer to handle your organization's specific questions.
Yes, definitely. And here we're going to talk about in this slide a little bit about how you can assess the risk, right? And the risk of also, as you may have heard from the explanations today, AI algorithms are incapable by nature of being 100% accurate 100% of the time. They are built to be flexible and creative, but at the cost of being imperfect. Now, that's fine in low-risk use cases, such as an individual staff person using AI to help brainstorm a topic or help with business writing. But it's much more risky when you start to involve financial transactions or sensitive topics. Now, maybe the benefits of time savings and empowerment that an AI tool brings will be so great that it is worth even a high risk. But do err on the side of caution. If there's a big benefit and a low risk, well, go for it. If there's a minimal benefit to an AI solution, but the risks feel very high, then you may want to wait until such time that the risk can confidently be lowered. And if you do proceed with an AI solution to a complex, risky problem, ensure your organization has a plan in place to monitor the impact AI is having on the staff, customers, clients, target populations, or whatever other stakeholder communities are involved. It is very important to regularly monitor performance and gather feedback from stakeholders. Establish a continuous cycle of monitoring and feedback to make sure you can adjust timely and as needed, right?
That's great, Patty. I kind of think of these two slides together as the more technical side of risk and responsibility. And we're also getting a lot of questions in the chat about what we might label, there's a lot of overlap between them, but we might label the ethical side of using AI. So social impact, potential of bias in the models, and environmental impact. And so I know that's where you're headed next year.
Correct. Yes. So the ethical and responsible use of AI is increasingly important as the technology becomes more embedded in our lives and as we rely on it to automate processes. Now, any organization venturing into AI should take time to thoughtfully engage with these topics when developing an AI strategy and policy. And Edwin is going to talk a bit more about that in a few minutes. And so while we can't cover all ethical considerations today, it's essential to ensure alignment with existing policies and, more importantly, with your organization's mission and values. So we will now talk briefly about bias and environmental impact. So as you can see with bias here, when we talk about it, we're referring primarily to the potential AI has to perpetuate and even exacerbate social and cultural biases. The written and visual records of human history are littered with biases of all sorts. And when AI models are trained on data sets that are weighted towards those historical biases, they can't help but express them when responding to our prompts. And as a result, those biases, which may even be fading in contemporary human culture, can be reinforced in people's minds and start to show up again in the verbal and visual content that we produce. Now, that content in turn may be used to train future AI models. And thus the cycle can repeat again and again, resulting in increasingly biased people who use increasingly biased AI tools. Now, we don't want to scare you or any organization from using AI, but rather inspire you to think critically about it. And if you're considering deploying it at scale or using it to generate content for external consumption, ensure that guidance is in place so that you gather input from a range of diverse perspectives before deploying it, as well as plan to review the AI's outputs and monitor its impact routinely. So AI tools are also environmentally costly to operate. The most powerful artificial neural networks, such as those used by ChatGPT, require massive amounts of computing power to build. Edwin mentioned in the beginning, it's tens or even hundreds of thousands of computers working together day and night for months on end. Now that requires a lot of electricity. The biggest technology corporations are investing in building or repurposing energy sources such as nuclear power plants to power these data centers. As an example, you may have seen in the news that the nuclear plant on 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania, which has been closed since 2019, will reopen in 2028 to provide power exclusively for data centers for the next 20 years. These data centers will consume the plant's entire output, using enough electricity to power about 800,000 homes. So clearly, AI is having a rapid and dramatic impact on electrical energy production and consumption. Now, AI also requires extraction, mining, or energy-intensive recycling of precious and rare earth metals that are needed to build the computer chips that run these AI models. And once the chips are in use, we need significant amounts of water circulating through the data centers to cool them down. Now, it's not easy to calculate the exact impact our use of AI has on the environment, as which specific AI model you're using, what kind of output you're generating, whether it be text, images, video, or perhaps a lot of research, and countless other variables beyond your control can make one query thousands of times more energy intensive than another. Now, some of the data around specific AI models is not publicly available, so existing estimates can only capture part of the picture. What we do know is that even the simplest prompts, like what is 2 + 3, may trigger millions of calculations because when the model doesn't have access to a simple calculator, it needs to search through all of written human history to find out that 5 is the most likely answer. All that searching requires a lot of power and precious resources. Now, how much they use will change as the technology evolves. The tools are becoming more efficient, but at the same time, more and more people are using it. Especially, so with Edwin mentioned GPT-5, right? So this tool now can decide on its own whether it has to do reasoning or can use its knowledge, its core knowledge. So that in itself makes it a lot more efficient than the previous tools. Now we say all of this.
Absolutely. That efficiency gain, as the models advance and become more powerful, they're also counterintuitively becoming more efficient. In the early days, you may have seen those headlines, right, where the newest models were more and more intense and more resource intensive than the last ones. Now we're hitting a point where they're being engineered to actually be more efficient with each new release, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. Yes. And again, we say all of this not to discourage you from using AI, but we want to inspire and encourage your awareness and mindfulness. So we are using AI at YPTC, as you've seen in the case studies, but we're using it judiciously and when we believe it's the right tool for the job. Now, I'll hand it back to Edwin, who's going to talk about guidelines and policies.
All right, thanks, Patty. Yeah, and just we only have a couple of minutes left here, so to close things out, it'll be faster to say this than to type it. There's a question here that says, when getting information from humans, a major skill is asking the question, so both parties have a common understanding of what information is actually needed. So how do we learn to ask the correct questions to AI? No short answer to that question, but it's a great opportunity to plug our checklist for mindful prompting, which is available in the same place that you can find the slides to download here in the platform. So I encourage you to take a look at that. It's as much a guide to communicating between people as it is to AI tools, and it's a great way to sort of think about that leap, that prompting is much like conversational engagement with an AI. So this question kind of answers it itself in a way. But I want to talk very briefly here about guidelines and policies. They're two separate things. Guidelines are the great place to begin if you don't already have any policies in place for AI. An even better place to begin is your acceptable use policies for digital tools and software in general. Because as Patty was saying just a moment ago and talking about GPT and data privacy, ChatGPT and data privacy, almost everything about these tools, insofar as they are automation, that's all should be covered under a software acceptable use policy. There's ultimately data coming in to an algorithm and then output going out, and that needs to be controlled. Access needs to be considered to all that data in process. And then while it's going through the algorithm, it's simply going through a digital automation that happens sort of very momentarily. So start with an acceptable software use policy if you don't already have one. Then you can move on to guidelines for how you or your organization is using AI, and make sure to align those with your mission and your values. Consider sort of where you are and where your comfort level is in an organization, and where your mission is with respect to social impact, environmental impact, and just the sort of feeling that everyone has around using these tools, which still feel, and I'm with them all day, every day, they still feel alien to me. There are still moments of strangeness about them. So think about those as guidelines, and then look for opportunities to elevate those guidelines into policies. This will protect the cautious among your teams and reassure the cautious and protect the adventurous. And you want innovation coming from both of those groups. And by giving them guidelines and policies, you'll help the adventurous stay safe, and you'll encourage the cautious to get off the sidelines and get involved. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. It's at the top of the hour. There's a great takeaway slide here where we're urging you all to embrace the creativity of these new probability machines that are AI tools, and how they can work together with traditional automation tools to do way more than we had ever imagined that automation could do before. As a part of that, you're going to need to tolerate their imperfection, set limits, set reasonable targets for what you're trying to accomplish and how good they need to be. they will never be 100% perfect. That's not what they're designed to do. So where do you need them to be worthwhile? And then finally, acknowledge their limitations, wrestle with them, learn continuously about their strengths and weaknesses so you can do that. So with that, thank you all very much. Patty, Christine, thank you so much for joining today and to share this wealth of knowledge. I love to hear you guys talk every time I learn something new. So hope everyone has a great day out there, and have fun with your AI.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.